What would you do if you woke up in the body of the most notorious villain in a game where every wrong move could lead to death? Now imagine that this is your new reality. Will the heroine be able to avoid tragedy and change her fate? Stay tuned to find out. Everything was perfect. Even the half-submerged house for one person, which was no bigger than the bathroom in the house I had lived in before, seemed fine. The fact that I had to start working soon didn't bother me. I had finally escaped from that hellish house and gained my freedom. I could be happy with just that. But then, I'm pretty sure I told you to stay as quiet as a mouse. Not even your breathing should be heard. A man spoke. His hateful gaze was fixed on me, as if I were an ugly bug. I heard you acted like a mad dog at the Crowned Prince's return ceremony banquet. That cold, deadly gaze, so familiar from that house, was once again aimed at me. But despite how often I had received it, it still made my heart race with fear. What was your purpose for acting like that? I could hardly breathe under the pressure of his gaze. My lips trembled with fear. It was then that a white chart appeared in front of me. Words began to appear on it, line by line. How do I know? I didn't have a purpose. In a pitiful tone, that's... I was about to ask what this was, but I couldn't speak, as if something was stuck in my throat. The man's voice pierced through my silence. You better speak. The pressure in the air was suffocating, like it could hurt my skin. I knew I had no choice but to answer. Without thinking, I pressed the third option on the chart. That's... The words came out of my mouth automatically, as if I had no control over them. What is this? What's happening? I opened my mouth, still in disbelief, unsure of what had just happened. I found myself in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by unfamiliar people, all radiating an aura of danger. I couldn't think straight, like I had just woken up from a deep sleep. That's it. Next. The man didn't seem satisfied with my incomplete answer. His cold expression twisted into a frown, and he ordered me to give a real answer. New sentences appeared on the chart. I'm sorry. I'll behave properly next time. A stupid maid started the trouble. The lowly ones treated me poorly. After all, I am the only daughter of Jiwoo Kim. I didn't have time to think it over. I quickly chose an answer, trying to gauge the mood in the room. Even though I had no idea what was happening, I had to say something. This reaction was a result of all the painful experiences I'd gone through. I'm sore. He cut me off immediately. We wouldn't even be in this situation if a simple apology could fix everything. His words felt like a slap to the face. I instinctively curled up, feeling the sting of his harsh tone. Then, in an icy voice, he said, Jiwoo Kim. Jiwoo Kim? We'll be suspending your Kim name for the time being. The name felt so familiar, and hearing it like that sent a chill through me. I quickly raised my head, finally getting a clear look at the man. He wasn't one of the people from that house, after all. He was a foreigner, someone I'd never seen before. His blue eyes, like the ocean, and his black hair, like polished obsidian, stood out to me. Above his head was a long bar, similar to a phone's battery indicator, with the word interest glowing above it. Interest? I couldn't believe my eyes. I shook my head in disbelief. So the rumors that you went insane are true, the man said, glaring at me for a moment before walking toward the door with swift steps, as if he couldn't stand to be in the same room with me for another second. The interest above his head remained at interest 0%. What did I do wrong? I stared at the back of his retreating figure, trying to piece together what had just happened. That's when I felt someone watching me, their gaze mocking me. I turned to see another person, standing in the shadow by the door, arms crossed. He had the same blue eyes as the man who had just left, but his smile seemed to mock me. Interest minus 10%. The word above his head was even negative. "Foolish bitch. Serves you right." Despite his pretty face, his words were anything but kind. He followed the man out, leaving me alone. Thud! The door slammed shut. I sat there, my mind blank, for a long time in the room where only I existed. My head felt foggy, and I still couldn't make sense of the situation I was in. After a moment, I realized that the place I was in and the two people I had just seen were somewhat familiar to me. It's a lie, right? Finally, I managed to say what had been on my mind when I was left alone. But even then, I didn't have time to process it. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't something that would happen to me. There's no way this is real. It couldn't be that the scene from the game I had been playing before I fell asleep was somehow replaying as my reality, and with me as one of the characters in the game. I'm dreaming right now. That was the only explanation that made sense. But no matter how much I pulled at my hair or pinched my face, I couldn't wake up from this dream. No, 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 I say no! Ji-woo Kim. She was the villainess of the most popular game for girls right now, and the heroine of the difficult mode. I had dived into this game, getting lost in it as I watched the characters experience regret, especially when the protagonist slowly began to attack their hearts. The game had drawn me in, and I was now completely immersed in it. I, who had just wanted to try the game, had ended up sinking into it. Reaching the ending had been easy, even though it was my first time playing this type of game. I had fun, that much was true, but the normal mode was far too simple, even for a beginner like me. From the very start, the male lead's interest in the heroine was already at 30%. It felt more like an easy mode than a normal one. I had seen every character's ending within 3 hours. Then a card popped up on the screen that said Hidden Ending, with a lock icon next to it. $100? Are they crazy? Why is it so expensive? To unlock the hidden ending, I either had to pay a ridiculous amount of money or finish the hard mode routes for each character. Shit, it's already midnight. I thought about the early class I had the next day, but that didn't matter much. Whatever! Let's get this over with! I was being controlled by the game now. Normally, I wouldn't have done something like this, but my fingers eagerly clicked the hard mode button. The prologue video began to play, this time with dramatic music. Ooh, the heroine changed. It was unexpected that the heroine would be someone else in this mode. She was the villain from the normal mode, the fake mistress of the Duke's family. This story took place before the normal mode heroine appeared, so it felt like a completely different game. Maybe that's why this game's so popular. The detailed illustration of the heroine in the hard mode appeared on the screen, making me more interested than ever. This game's unique system was unlike any other, and it caught my attention even more. The Villainess, who was evil to the angel-like heroine, was now winning the hearts of the male leads, even though there were strict barriers to their affections. It gave me a strange excitement, a flutter in my chest that I couldn't explain. I continued through the main story of the hard mode, confident that I would do fine. After all, I had completed all the normal mode routes. Even though it was called hard mode, I expected the choices to be only a bit more difficult. But that was a mistake. Ack! Ack! Why did I die again? Hard mode was insanely difficult. The Villainess from the start had to work so hard just to raise the male lead's interest. It wasn't just that, though. The interest I had carefully built up dropped straight to game over after making the smallest mistake. And these weren't normal game over screens. They were cruel, disturbing deaths for the heroine. Why does it have to be so extreme? The illustrations were so realistic and brutal. I frowned at the image of the heroine getting sliced across the neck by the crowned prince. This crazy game. I died multiple times because of the difficult choices I made, and frustration began to build up. What kind of person made the difficulty level this hard? I had died so many times that I started to feel actual stress from playing. Please, let me live just once. My goal had been to unlock the hidden ending, but that was a distant thought by now. I just wanted to see the Villainess survive, at least with one of the male leads, and be happy. Why is the Villainess always the one to be blamed? Honestly, it's the author who made her the Villainess! Unlike the heroine from the normal mode, who received everyone's love no matter what choices I made, the Villainess was always mistreated, no matter how much she begged for love. It reminded me of my own life before. I'll see this ending no matter what. I was killed again by the older bastard brothers. The sound of my teeth grinding could be heard in the room. I didn't remember how many times I had died by now. My hands, gripping my heated phone, were shaking. I knew I was getting too emotional over this, but I couldn't stop clicking the reset button. I started over, choosing lines, slowly raising their interest, gaining fame, glamour, and money, just to unlock the new route. Ack! Why? Why? But I died again. The frustration built up to the point where I thought about just buying the interest with money. If the game creator's goal was to make players spend money, then they had succeeded spectacularly. They had made me, someone who values money more than anything, want to throw it all away for this. I didn't end up spending the money, but I was consumed with rage all night, determined to see at least one character's ending. Die. Restart. Die again. Restart, die, and die again. I kept dying until the sun came up, but I still hadn't seen any of their endings. Damn it. Again! Just as I was about to press the reset button for another attempt, I couldn't take it anymore. I passed out, my phone still clutched in my hand. When I opened my eyes again, Ji-woo Kim. The man with the blank gauge bar above his head, the word interest 0% glowing, spoke. We will withdraw the name Kim from you for some time. I was the Villainess from the game I had never managed to see the ending of. Lady, wake up now. I heard a voice whisper above me. Despite being fast asleep, I could always wake up at the slightest presence of someone. I refused to believe what had happened to me. Everything that had kept me up all night, trying to make sense of it, hoping it was just a dream. I wished so hard to wake up from it, and I think I fell asleep in the process. Lady, the cautious voice came again. Is she calling me? The two men with blue eyes had left already, and as far as I remembered, I had been alone in this room until the very last moment I was awake. So, the person who could be called a lady could only be me. I was drowsy, lost in thought, and couldn't answer right away. It was only a moment later when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I began to wake up from my sleep. I tried to gather the strength to sit up. A sharp pain shot through my forearm from outside the comforter. Ack! My eyes shot open automatically, and I screamed as I jumped up, kicking the comforter off. I quickly pulled up my sleeve to check the pain on my forearm. This. I was shocked by what I saw. The thin skin of my forearm was covered with deep bruises, marking the places where needles had been used. If it weren't human flesh but fabric, it would have had holes all over it. I was still reeling from the sight of a drop of blood on my forearm when I heard a voice beside me. You're awake now. The voice was casual, almost indifferent. I turned my head in that direction to see a brown-haired girl with freckles. She was a maid. In the illustrations, all maids had faceless appearances and wore the same outfit. The girl standing in front of me was no different. I didn't know where she had hidden the needle she poked me with, but she didn't have anything in her hands now. She was observing me with a smug look, as if she was enjoying my confusion. What's her problem? Doing this to someone who hadn't even done anything to her. I opened my mouth, wanting to snap at her, but no words came out. I couldn't speak, no matter how hard I tried. Why isn't anything helping me in this situation? Damn it! I just glared at her silently, but the maid seemed unfazed. "I've prepared the bathing water for you. Please go and wash yourself, lady." An evil smile curled her lips as she started making the bed. She seemed used to treating this body like this. I sat still, biting my lip in frustration, but I was pushed into the bathroom by the maid. She said she had prepared the bathing water, but the only thing in the bathroom was a bucket filled with cold water. It was so freezing that just dipping my finger into it gave me goosebumps. I wasn't expecting any real service, but this is too much. I had heard stories about how the Villainess suffered the worst treatment, but nothing as specific as this. I had to face the overwhelming reality once again. I had actually entered the game. I looked at the scar with dried blood on my forearm, and as I did, tears started to well up. What is this? This wasn't in the game. Then, suddenly, an image flashed in my mind, an illustration of the Villainess in an open-shouldered dress. Unlike the flawless illustrations of other characters, this one had small dots drawn on one of her forearms. Wait, those weren't birthmarks. If they weren't birthmarks, maybe they were something important I had missed while playing. Perhaps they were signs of the abuse she endured. It was unbelievable how detailed the story was, but at the same time, it surprised me how intricately it had been plotted. "Lady, breakfast has been prepared. Are you done yet?" The maid called from outside the bathroom door. "Ugh," says the one who's clearly not a match for me. I felt annoyed, but with no choice, I dipped my hand into the freezing cold water again. To someone who had suffered so much from my stepbrother bastards for years, this felt like nothing. I was the Villainess anyway, so part of me wanted to leave needle marks on that maid, just like she did to me. But I knew I had to investigate everything first, since I couldn't even speak freely in this situation. The moment I stepped out of the bathroom, drying my face with a towel, I saw the table set with food, just as the maid had said. It seemed I even had to eat in the room, probably because I was grounded by the Duke's first son. "Take a seat, lady." The maid pulled me by the hand and sat me at the table. But as soon as I sat down, I couldn't stop frowning. The meal laid out before me didn't look edible at all. The plate had a piece of blue, moldy bread, and the bowl held a thick, gray soup with strange, unidentifiable solids floating in it. "Hurry up and eat. I know you're hungry." The maid smiled widely as she urged me to eat. I clenched my teeth and glared at her. A white square screen popped up in front of my eyes. Flipping the table, "What's this? You crazy! Bring me the chef right now! Right now!" Shoved the fork in the maid's mouth. "You want me to eat this? Not even a dog would eat it. How about you eat it first?" I'd already experienced the game over twice in this scene. When I chose option 1, all the workers ran to the Duke, acting pitiful, to confess about the Villainess's troublesome behavior. The son, furious after hearing this, forbade anyone from giving me a drop of water during my grounding, and I died from hunger. On my next turn, I chose option 2. The Duke's son happened to pass by and stepped in, pulling the Villainess away from the maid. In the process, the Villainess was shoved roughly, fell, and the fork that fell from her hand stabbed her in the neck. It was a ridiculous way to die. In the end, there's only one choice. This scene was likely meant to explore the relationships between the Villainess turned heroine and the long-serving workers in the mansion. However, since I didn't want to see the heroine's mistreatment from the start, I skipped it after dying twice. There were dozens of episodes to unlock anyway. But now, in front of me, there was no return button to take me back to the episode selection page. Damn! I glared at the maid standing beside me, feeling powerless as I clicked the third option. As soon as I did, my body began moving on its own, as though someone else were controlling me. My hand reached for the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of the rotten soup. Despite my best efforts to stop, my hands trembled as the spoon made its way toward my mouth. A few drops of the gray liquid spilled onto the table. No matter how much I willed myself not to eat, my body continued to move on its own. Finally, the spoon was shoved into my mouth. Ugh! The horrible taste hit me immediately. It wasn't food. It was like boiled organic garbage. My body continued to obey as I swallowed the disgusting liquid, feeling it travel down my throat. Gasp! The maid gasped, as if she didn't expect me to actually eat it. Ugh! I feel like I'm going to vomit! I gagged, trying to forget the feeling as much as I could. Well, I guess one spoonful is enough. I wouldn't die from a spoonful of organic garbage, I thought. I sighed in relief, thinking I had gotten through one episode. But my hand, still holding the spoon, didn't stop. What is it doing? What's going on? I had no control over my body as it continued to force the moldy blue bread and gray soup into my mouth. The maid's face paled as she watched me eat the spoiled food. My body kept up the crazed motions until the Duke's son happened to walk in. What are you doing? Young Master Minseok! The maid panicked at the sudden appearance of the figure. Ugh! Ugh! I didn't have time to focus on that. I quickly covered my mouth with both hands, trying to stop myself from gagging. It felt like everything I had consumed was about to come rushing back up. Why do I have to experience this? I had suffered enough even before entering the game. How many times had I been tormented by the two bastards in that hellish house? But now I had to experience it all over again in this fictional world? A strand of saliva escaped from between my hands. I felt myself tearing up from the unfairness and disgust of it all. I groaned, as if I had just swallowed poison. Seeing this, the pink-haired man approached me with a shocked expression. Hey, are you okay? He stopped mid-sentence, freezing in shock as he looked at the food on the table. This, moldy blue bread and rotten soup. It was a disaster. No one would believe that this was served to a lady from a duke's family. Even commoners wouldn't eat this garbage for breakfast. Half of the food was already gone, and there I was, covering my mouth, looking pale. The pink-haired man turned to look at the maid, his face twisting into a horrifying frown. Hey, what did you just feed her? Young master, this is, well... The maid's face drained of color as she trembled in fear from the deadly aura. He obviously didn't expect this. How could an outsider just passing by guess that the fake lady who was always making a fuss would be eating rotten food, prepared intentionally, without any complaints? The pink-haired man snapped at the maid, who couldn't even give a proper response. This is beyond humiliating! How dare you mock our family, a mere maid like you, treating the one you're serving like this? Young master, that's a misunderstanding. Please, young master. Get out! Get out of this room now! Young master! I'll explain this whole thing to my father and brother. Is there anyone out there? Butler! Thinking that this life was a gift from God for the pitiful me. But I managed to endure and finally escape that awful house. I got accepted into a world-renowned university, and even though the house was small and dirty, I had a place to relax. I was free of the two bastards, with only the future ahead of me, full of promise. What I'm trying to say is that Jiwoo Kim's life, where every tiny mistake led to my death, isn't any better. In fact, it's far worse. It would be a different story if I were at least the heroine of the normal mode, whose every decision led to walking the flower path. But why? But why, to me, who had just managed to escape that hellish house? Just why? Slam! I screamed, slamming my hand down on the sink. The reflection of a beautiful girl in the mirror showed a face filled with fury, far more enraged than sad. She looked like the greatest villain in the game. Ha! I sighed deeply and ran my hand through my hair, flipping it over. I thought about Jiwoo Kim, the villainess of the game, and the heroine of the hard mode. Jiwoo Kim was actually a commoner with no surname. Jiwoo Kim, who grew up constantly moving with her sick mother, caught the attention of the Duke, who had been desperately searching for his lost daughter. After her mother passed away, Jiwoo Kim was adopted by the Kim family. The only reason she became a lady in the Duke's house was because of her resemblance to the lost daughter the Duke was searching for. Her pink hair, inherited from the late Duchess, and the clear blue eyes, symbols of the Kim family. I thought of the Duke's second son, whom I had seen just earlier. His hair was also the lovely pink color of the late Duchess, but the woman in the mirror had hair closer to a flame color than pink, and her turquoise eyes, while beautiful, were slightly different from the rest of the families. He should have continued searching for his daughter. Why did he take in a random child? As Jiwoo Kim grew, she no longer looked like his daughter. The Duke quickly lost interest in her and shut her out of his life. All she had left were her two stepbrothers and the abuse from the servants. It's so similar to my life that it feels unpleasant. Jiwoo Kim's life and the treatment she received were eerily similar to mine. It was something I hadn't noticed when I was playing the game. I suddenly felt down. Fake lady. Every servant in the mansion called Jiwoo Kim a fake. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but in everyone's eyes, she was just a poor imitation of the original. Maybe if she had acted cute or sweet toward others, the story would have played out differently. But instead, her personality hit rock bottom, even though she was just a girl who accidentally ended up in the family. Flashing back to the prologue of the story, it was explained. She was always on guard, like a hedgehog with her spikes up, and always caused trouble wherever she went, no matter the situation. I wondered why the dialogue choices were always ones that would cause a scene. I nodded, finally understanding why all the choices I had to pick from were so extreme. Jiwoo Kim was actually a villain, a name that sounded powerful. Unlike the naive heroine of the normal mode, she came across as sharp and cautious. But now I understood Jiwoo Kim, at least a little. Just today. No, just a few hours ago, I had experienced the kind of treatment she'd been getting for who knows how long. I think it was enough for me to understand how miserable her life must have been. Even though she's called a fake, how could they treat her like this, poking her with needles? And yet, she was picked by the Duke himself. Not even a single maid would wake the others up like that. Jiwoo Kim was adopted into the Duke's family when she was 12. If she had been abused from that day on, there was little she could have done as a little child to stop the adults who wouldn't listen to her, no matter how much she shouted. Is this proof of her being a villainess? Nothing could change the fact that she had been constantly abused, even up to today. No one showed mercy towards Jiwoo Kim, and the treatment that crushed her spirit was rough and insane. I feel a bit sorry for her. I raised my hand and gently stroked Jiwoo Kim's fragile, soft cheek. The reflection of the girl with strong pink hair in the mirror looked sorrowful. However, I quickly pushed away the feeling of pity. Ha! Who's sorry for who? It wasn't the time to think peacefully. I was Jiwoo Kim now, and that meant I could die at the hands of the male characters at any moment, just like Jiwoo Kim did in the game. The fear of that reality struck me. I searched for a pen and some paper as soon as I got out of the bathroom. I had to figure out a way to survive now that I was Jiwoo Kim. In this hard mode, raising anyone's interest was difficult, and if it dropped to negative, it meant death. It was even worse with the Duke's second son. His interest started off negative. If his interest didn't rise to positive soon, death was inevitable. I needed to organize some game information. At least the fake lady had some things that came with being a lady. In the large room stood a luxurious bookshelf and a desk. Without hesitation, I took a seat. I dipped the end of the quill into ink. Characters first. There were 5 male characters in the game. The 2 sons of the Duke, the crowned prince, the wizard, and the knight. In hard mode, their interest started at 0% or negative, unlike in normal mode where each character started with 30%. I began writing everything I remembered on the blank sheet of paper. First, Derek Kim. He was the first son of the Duke. Technically, the young Duke of the family, Derek, was the typical nobleman. He was generally uninterested in Jiwoo Kim, as he was too busy preparing to become the next Duke. However, he held strong contempt and hatred for her, as she had taken his blood-related sister's place. In the game, Derek rarely killed Jiwoo Kim himself, but he didn't forget to punish her whenever she made a mistake. If the player made a mistake, they would be penalized, and their choices would be restricted. Just like today, I couldn't leave the room due to the punishment given yesterday. Next, the youngest son of the Duke, Min-suk Kim. This guy, well, there wasn't much to say. He was a very wacky, active person with a bad temper, always picking fights with Jiwoo Kim. As the leader of those who abused Jiwoo Kim, it wasn't surprising that he was the first to do so. What was surprising was that he was always the one to bring Jiwoo Kim to her death in unexpected and strange ways. Now that I think about it, these two are kind of like the bastards in our house, aren't they? I clicked my tongue, reviewing the information I had written. These two had the easiest routes to master in normal mode. It was because they had family love for her, not romantic love, as they were blood-related. However, Jiwoo Kim was not blood-related to them at all, meaning there was a higher chance of a different ending in hard mode. I shook my head and scribbled a big X over their names. They have no answers. These two are hopeless. On top of that, Min-seok's interest started in the negatives. Not just 0, but negative. This was what the producer was telling me. There's no hope with Min-seok, so just give up on him. Besides, I got nauseous just hearing the word appa, so I fully gave up on them. Next, the Crowned Prince. Callisto Regulus, the Crowned Prince. The only information I had about him came from the normal mode. The Crowned Prince, burdened by his tragic childhood, meets the angelic protagonist and heals his heart before punishing the villainess, Jiwoo Kim. To the protagonist, it was justice, but to Jiwoo Kim, the Crowned Prince was like a grim reaper. He was the one who killed her most in hard mode. I reset the game so many times during his route that I couldn't even remember what happened in the game. Let's not even go near this guy! I remembered the illustration with Callisto slicing my neck over and over. A chill ran down my spine. Crisscross. I marked X's on his name many times and quickly moved on to the next. The next was Bwinter Verdandi, the wizard and marquis. As a wizard, he hid his identity as a marquis. He exchanged information and mysterious objects, which allowed him to learn that the protagonist was the Duke's lost daughter. After that, he gathers information about the villainess and her evil plans. He either warns the protagonist or takes action to block the danger himself. Beyond that, he's the character most responsible for helping her gain honor and glamour. In the normal mode, he performs romantic magic for the protagonist. He's a sweet man who helps from the shadows, but I don't know how he is in hard mode. I was already busy dying at the hands of the Crowned Prince and the two sons of the Duke before Bwinter's route even started. Anyway, he has more potential and hope than the previous 3 brats, so for now, I decided to leave it at that. And last, Eclipse. Eclipse, the knight of the Duke family, was a commoner. The Duke, who had gone into town one night, saw Eclipse, who was exceptional in swordsmanship, and bought him for a high price to bring him in as a knight in training. Later, he became the youngest swordmaster and was granted noble status. He earned the title of Young and Handsome Guy. Eclipse was the character with the most potential for a good ending among the 5 males. He was the only one who felt sympathy for Jiwoo Kim until the end. Jiwoo Kim was his last master. And perhaps that's why he was the least likely to stop Jiwoo Kim from mistreating the protagonist, even though I never met him in the hard mode. There's nothing much that can help me at this point. I let out a deep sigh, looking over my finished list. I didn't know much about the hard mode since everything kept blocking my path. Even if I did, I wasn't sure how useful it would be, since I didn't know how the system in this reality would differ from the game. One thing I did know for sure, though, was that I die when a male character's interest reaches negative, and that there's a time limit to reach an ending. Jiwoo Kim's coming-of-age ceremony was fast approaching. I had to finish the route of at least one of the capture characters before that day. That was when the protagonist would make her debut in the story. Poor Jiwoo Kim. She loses everything when the real daughter of the Duke appears, just as she becomes an adult. That was the beginning of the normal mode. If I didn't end up with anyone by then, I was likely to die by one of their hands, even if I didn't act like a villainess. Of course, there wasn't any guarantee I wouldn't die before that even began. I can't die. I clenched my teeth, thinking about my sorrowful future. Yes, I couldn't die. I had just escaped from that rotten house. I couldn't just die in a game like this. I won't die no matter what. My morning class at school was waiting for me. I would live and return to where I belonged. I stared blankly at I don't know what, resolved to live. It was then. Knock, knock. I heard 2 knocks at the door. Before I even had time to hide the papers I'd written on, the door suddenly opened. Lady! The person standing before me was an old butler with white hair. He didn't enter, just stood by the door as he spoke. His Grace requests your presence. I knew the words on the paper wouldn't show in his eyes, but I felt irritated by his rude attitude. When I lived in my house, the manager would never have opened the door like that. Moreover, this world wasn't based on democracy but classism. I was deciding whether to just deal with it or do something about it. But before I could decide, a white box appeared in front of my eyes, throwing the objects in the room. How dare you open the door to my room without my permission? Do you wish for death, old man? If he has something to say, tell him to come himself. Glares at him for 5 seconds, then gets up. Okay. I forgot again. I wasn't in a position where I could get angry and do whatever I wanted. But I didn't want to act like I was forced into any of the 3 choices given. I chose option 3, feeling annoyed. Interest or whatever, I had to figure out how to deal with this option chart. Okay. It was fortunate that the Duke was calling for me now. I quickly hid the papers in a drawer and stood up from my seat. Then I followed the butler out of my room. I only knew this mansion from a few illustrations, so I decided to take the opportunity to carefully observe the surroundings. The mansion was gigantic, like the castles you see in movies. Jiwoo Kim's room was on the 2nd floor. Inside the mansion, it seemed busy. I passed many workers in the halls. The workers' gazes as I walked by didn't seem friendly, but I ignored them. I'd gotten used to those kinds of looks long before I came here. The butler led the way down to the 1st floor and soon arrived at a well-decorated door. It seemed to be the Duke's office. Knock, knock, knock. Your Grace, I've escorted the lady here. Come in. Creak. The door opened as the butler stepped in. I entered the room, feeling a bit nervous. But there wasn't really anything to be nervous about. It's just a single scene from a game. Even so, my hands continued to tremble slightly, a subconscious reaction to the memory of my blood-related father and the way the Duke treated Jiwoo Kim in the game. Once inside, the Duke didn't even look up. I hesitated near his desk, standing still. I hid my trembling fingers and bowed slightly, though I couldn't speak. The game hadn't provided this much detail, but it felt like the right thing to do, judging by the aura around me. You've come. The Duke finally glanced up at me, raising his head just slightly. He had the same black hair and blue eyes as Derek. His face was emotionless, just like the high-status nobles depicted in the game illustrations. At the same time, a white box appeared in front of me. "Why have you called? I'm busy. Please get straight to the point." Glare without saying anything. I chose option 1, feeling irritated by the other options. "Why have you called?" "I heard there was a fuss this morning." As soon as he finished, the choices in the box quickly changed to new options. "Your Grace has nothing to do with it. You probably wanted this fuss to happen. It wasn't my fault. This was all that stupid maid's doing." I almost lost control reading those options. Ha! These insane choices. Of course, I had experienced this before. When I was playing the game in the other world, I was eager to pick the second option, planning to make Jiwoo Kim a sassy chic femme fatale. But now, thinking that this came back to me in reality, I was speechless. Even though I'm still a villainess, what father in the world would treat his not even blood-related daughter so well? Shit. Tap. When I didn't answer right away, the Duke set down the pen in his hand and lifted his gaze toward me. His eyes were sharp and keen, his aura intense. I hope this doesn't trigger a death flag. I chose option 1, trembling inside. I clenched my teeth, trying not to say that word. "Your Grace has nothing to do with it." But it came out weird, and I couldn't stop the word in the end. "Jiwoo." The Duke's voice was cold, like ice, devoid of warmth. No matter how much I tried, the story kept flowing without changing. "Has it already been 6 years since you came to this house?" I searched my memories, recalling the details of the game. In both normal and hard modes, the heroine was 18, and Jiwoo Kim had been adopted at 12. That meant, yes, he was right. I remembered the one detail I had forgotten about the game. The 18th birthday marked the coming-of-age ceremony for everyone here. That meant Jiwoo Kim's coming-of-age ceremony was approaching. How much time do I have left? While I tried to process the information, thankfully, the Duke continued speaking without me having to choose one of the new options. "I don't know if you know, but it's not easy to step foot in this house. Only those who've proven themselves useful can enter through the gates of the Kim mansion after passing several strict inspections. I didn't hesitate or hold anything back in providing you support. I accepted everything, even after seeing you living a luxurious life and doing things I could never forgive. However, I can't figure out what good you've brought to our family these past 6 years." It was true. If I had even remotely resembled his biological daughter, I might have held a sliver of his interest. But Jiwoo Kim's hair and eye color were too different from the proper shades of pink and blue. I wanted to nod and say that his words were true, but my body wouldn't move an inch, controlled by the system. The white box, which had disappeared when I stayed silent, appeared again. "So, what do you expect me to do? Are you going to kick me out of this house now? I'm not at fault." Kneel down. "Finally." I was relieved to see a normal answer I could choose without hesitation. I pressed option 3, excited to finally pick an option that felt right. I knew the other choices would disappear, so I acted quickly. Thud! My body was automatically forced to kneel, as if something had kicked the back of my legs and pushed my shoulders down. Ack! Why is it so strong? I was expecting this, but the force was more painful than I imagined, and my eyes watered slightly. What are you doing? The Duke looked more shocked by the thud than I was. His eyes widened. I never chose this option when I was playing. I mean, it didn't make sense. Why would a cheap gourd kneel down? I don't know if the producer was lazy or thought it was a waste of time, but they made the next decision overlap with the choices in normal mode. Is me kneeling down the only way to make you satisfied? Glare with no words. I'm sorry for everything, Father. I quickly pressed option 3, just like I did before. I'm sorry for everything, Father! The voice that came out of my mouth was loud, probably because I chose option 3 with certainty and confidence. "What?" the Duke asked, clearly confused. It was then that the familiar white box popped up in my view. Hidden Quest, the lost title of a father. Mission. Complete! As a reward, the function choices on off is given. Do you want to off the choices? Yes. No. With no hesitation, I clicked yes. The choices box disappeared completely from my view. Awesome! I celebrated inwardly, clenching my fists. The hidden function, choices on off, allowed me to call the Duke father. If I chose off, the choices in the game would disappear, and only the numbered options 1, 2, and 3 would remain. Sometimes, simple responses or answers could be typed directly with the phone's keyboard. These could include things like yes, no, character names, and other simple phrases. It was an easy function to unlock in normal mode. The purpose of it was likely to prevent repetitive scenarios based on the lines chosen and to add flexibility to the game, promoting faster play. But even with that function, I rarely used it. The normal mode was so easy and fast that it didn't really require it. That's why I didn't pay much attention to the scene in hard mode. I didn't know hard mode would work the same as normal mode. I hadn't unlocked the choices on off function before because I'd chosen the wrong lines. But it wasn't a necessary feature for someone like me, who was addicted to choosing the right lines for the Villainess. I didn't know back then that my addiction would become a poison, and that poison would be right here, right now. I sighed at my own foolishness as I recited the words with my will, not from the 3 options on the screen. Efe, tho, Hearing those words come from my own mouth was so touching that tears lingered in my eyes. The Duke, who had never heard Jiwoo Kim say father, looked at me in disbelief, his eyes widening even more. I wasn't affected by his reaction. I continued speaking. I apologize for making a fuss during my grounded days. I wasn't able to show the proper respect as someone of a higher status, and that caused this scandal. I will deeply reflect on my actions for the remaining time I'm grounded. There won't be another incident like this, so please forgive me this once, Father. I begged, still kneeling. When you think about it, the morning's fuss wasn't my fault. A maid had bullied me. It wasn't my fault at all. It was a situation where I needed help. But Jiwoo Kim's past actions, before I became her, forced me into this position where I had no choice but to kneel. I had to be careful because my life wouldn't be in immediate danger even if the Duke didn't like me. However, if I didn't handle this carefully, just because I had the function to turn off the choices, I'd likely end up on a path where only penalties awaited me. It was obvious. Jiwoo Kim had already been grounded after causing a fuss, and now she had caused another one. The so-called young master, Derek, was the one who grounded me this time, and I knew that acting stubborn and aggressive would only lower his interest in me. I understand how immature I've acted until now. If you give me another chance, I'll do my best to prove my worth to this family until the day of my coming-of-age ceremony. I stayed kneeling, not moving a muscle, even after I finished speaking. I had never begged anyone, not even my real birth parents. This game truly was a mess. I'm begging with my body on the ground. Just hurry and say okay already. I mentally slapped myself for my foolishness and how tired I felt. I needed rest. You! The Duke looked down at me as if I were a stranger. He couldn't seem to find the words at first. His jaw moved, but no sound came out for a while, until finally he spoke. I get what you're saying. Get up from the floor now. Yes. I got up without hesitation, though my legs were so tired I could hardly stay standing. The words spoken by the Kim family are heavy, Jiwoo Kim. The Duke's tone was low, still staring at me. Those words carried a lot of weight. Thank you. I won't let you regret forgiving me today, Father. You should leave now. I quickly got up and left the room as soon as he finished speaking. I was worried that if I moved too slowly, the route would change.